Hello, Theo, Alqueta.
Hello.
Nice to see
Welcome,
you.
Denita.
Excuse me very much. I was confused between 19 and 9 p.m. So everything was planned for me in the house to speak at 9 p.m. Sorry very much. I hope you are not waiting for a long time. Sorry.
No, just 8 minutes. It's okay, Denita. Now without WhatsApp, nothing is working, and I have a full class of my friend, my kids, friends of COVID positive today. So it's a nightmare. Oh. It's really a nightmare. So, but it's okay. Sorry. We need after this a cool meditation and hope that we'll thank you very much, Denita, for coming. So we have here many researchers from our public administration division, but I will let Theo and Claudia to present you and your paper today. I would like once again thank you for being here with us, and thank you all of you for catching up with as an audience despite all the difficulties that we are facing today in Brazil. Thanks a lot, Denisa. We are welcome.
Thank you very much, Alqueta, for the invitation. And yes, we are living crazy times, but this also makes possible for me to be among Brazilian scholars, which is for me a very incredible thing, and I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thanks a lot, Denita, to say yes to our invitation. Thanks a lot to Professor Alqueta that make the connection between us of the Public Administration Division and you, Denita. Thanks a lot. I am the head of the division until 2023. Tiago Dias is my colleague in the committee. Suilan is my colleague too in the committee. And you have a lot of researchers here and people and colleagues and Brazilian researchers that are leaders of some specific issues in our division. A lot of these issues or tracks are related to the equality, inequality, the improvement of public administration. Thanks a lot to be with us, and Professor Claudia Passador will discuss your speech with us and all colleagues here. If you don't mind, you can do something more not formal in your speech to give to the people some space to debate too. But thanks a lot. Claudia, please.
Thank you for the invite, Theo and Alqueta. Nice to meet you. I'm so happy because I have a special friend in Vergata University, Mark Miniguzzo. So to find another researcher from this university is a big honor to me. I listen to your presentation, and I think it is better I talking about after the presentation. Okay, Theo?
Yep. Before we start, I'd like to make a mention to two colleagues that
the microphone.
Oh, you were mute.
Sorry. Before you start the speech of Professor Denita, I'd like to mention two colleagues that passed by in today, last day, and another colleague around a month ago. The Professor Sidney from Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul passed by, and we say sorry because this, and the Professor Luciano Prates Junqueira, one of the most important research of the public Brazilian public administration field and division. Our respect to our colleague, Professor Luciano Junqueira, and I think most of the people know Neil Luciano, a very good researcher that passed by around a month ago, I think so. So the professor Denita is an associate professor at University of Rome, Tor Vergata, where she teaches business administration and public management and coordinates PhD program track in public management and governance. Her main research interests are in the areas of collaborative governance, network management and co-production, cutback management, strategic performance management. She is member of the editorial committees of Public Management Review, of Revista de Administração Pública, RAP from Brazil, and of International Journal of Public Sector Performance Management. She is president of Technical Commission on Performance at the Department of Public Administration, Italian Presidents of the Council of the Ministers. Thanks one more time, Denita. The floor is yours, and thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I'll try to share my slides. Okay, you should see them.
Yeah, is all right.
All right. All right. So I've been invited to talk about the topic of equity in public services. And in fact, equity has become now a very relevant topic for a lot of countries, not only developing countries, but also well-developed countries like European and also OECD or the United States. And in fact, a lot of international institutions are talking about equity. Now, what I'm going to present today is the result of a systematic literature review that has been published only a few months ago in Public Administration Review. But I will try to make a more general discussion and debate on equity, focusing also on future research, on what we can do on this very deep, important topic as public management, as public administration scholars. So first of all, some definitions on quality. Quality has to do with fairness in the provision of services, but also in the definition of public policies. There are a lot of definitions of equity, from simple fairness and equal treatment to all, to definitions that have to do with redistribution, with reduction of existing inequalities. We have a lot of research on equality and on equity, on employment, politics, jurisprudence, voting, and a lot of other issues. But we don't have a lot of research on equity in public services. And this is a very big gap, a very concerning gap. This means that while political science and law and public policy scholars are doing their research on equity, as public management scholars, we are not giving the same contribution. We are not paying attention, or we have not paid attention to equity. So this is the motivation why we carried out this systematic literature review. How can we conceptualize equity? A first conceptualization can be made in terms of input. In terms of input, it means that the same opportunities, the same funding, the same access is given to everybody. So let's say when the state, the federal government funds healthcare, it does so based on the population, the number of people that live in an area. Okay, I give you the same money because you have the same number of people. Or it can be made in terms of process. The same procedure is followed for everyone. Or it can be made in terms of output. And now things get more interesting. I don't care how much money you invest in each state or region or hospital, I care how much output people get. And this is the output equity. Or even in terms of outcomes, we have all read a lot of articles during the COVID-19 on how COVID-19 had meant more death for Black people, for poor people. Okay, this is a measure of equity in terms of outcomes. It means that the impact of prevention of fighting COVID was lower, less satisfactory for some targets of the population. So all these different definitions can be found in the literature. And there are also two, let's say, extremes, two poles. On one side, you have equity as a right. Okay, you have the right of certain services. On the other extreme, you have equity measured according to payment capacity. So who can pay more for a service should pay more. This second meaning has become very popular with the new public management reform. There is also a big difference between vertical and horizontal equity, or between equity and equality. Equality means treating everyone in a uniform way, treating everyone in the same way. Equity means treating different situations in a different way, paying more attention or more money or more resources to those that are more in need. But in the literature, there is a lot of confusion between equity and equality. Sometimes equality is used to mean equity, especially in some public policy documents. And then there are a lot of trade-offs. Sometimes fairness or social justice is used to mean equity. Also, efficiency and effectiveness are two terms that are very used in public management literature, and usually it is understated that equity is part of effectiveness, but it should not be so. We can have a very effective public organization, but a not equitable service or policy. So equity needs to have its own place in the political discourse and also in research. This is not just an academic theoretical discussion. This has practical implications, because if equity is confused, this means that also bureaucrats are not held accountable in guaranteeing equity, in measuring equity. So what is the state of the art? We have the world that is full of disparities, and the crisis make equity weaker and weaker and weaker. And on the other hand, we have still an underdeveloped topic of academic research and teaching. Now, when we talk about academia, we go back to the 1968, when in the United States, the first Minnowbrook conference was held, and it was all dedicated to social equity. And in this year, we have the first studies and also let's say the agreement among public administration scholars that equity is a pillar of public administration, together with efficiency and effectiveness. Today, we have a wide use of the word equity. The United Nations has adopted this strategy called Build Back Better, which I recall in the title of my presentation. And the United Nations is asking global leaders and national leaders to try to build back not what we had before the COVID-19, but something better, something in which poorer and weaker parts of the society will not be found so open to crisis, so vulnerable. And also the United States, President Biden has adopted the Building Back Better strategy, and also words. The words that are chosen are important. Also, the OECD and the WHO have both announced that equity will become the next problem for the world. And we see also in the everyday news that from also from an economic point of view, people that were rich before the pandemic are getting richer, and people that were poor are getting poorer. And this means that equity has had a strong blow as a consequence of the pandemic. You see, I extrapolated just very few articles of a big database on equity and COVID-19, just to highlight how actual the topic is. Health equity, equity in education systems, where we had to close schools in many parts of the world. And now we have studies. There's an interesting study in Spain that says that distance learning has worked very well for bright students and has not worked at all for students that were already in delay, that come from vulnerable families. So we have problems of equity in education, in health. We have problems for the homeless, problems that the local governments have to address. And the last example of inequity is in vaccines. We see the access to vaccination of the different countries, and we see there are countries that have more vaccines than people, and countries, low-income countries, when the vaccines have not appeared at all. And because it is a pandemic, which means global, we cannot get out of the pandemic unless all the countries get out of the COVID-19. So equity is a big issue, and there is some, let's say, confusion and a big gap on public management from the public management perspective. So what we did in our literature review, and I can share the article with you, was to take all articles that had equity, either in the equity or equality, because taking in mind the confusion between the two terms, we searched for both terms. So we made a research on the different databases of these two terms. And we came out with 150 articles, more or less, that were relevant. So we excluded all the not relevant articles. We focused on equity and services and public services. So equity in other issues, for example, we eliminated all the gender equity issues in employment. Not because these are not important, these are very important, but there is a huge literature on the topic on gender equality. And we took what was there in terms of public services, a very fragmented literature, but we put it together according to these 8, let's say, fields. So we look at, I will give you now a short summary for each of the topics on equity, and then we will draw the conclusion. So the most historical literature stream on equity is the one on representative bureaucracy. This theory says that if human resources in a public administration are able to mirror the population that they serve in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, they will provide a better service. So this is where the passive representativeness transforms into active representation. So the equity in human resources, the equity in the personnel, translates into equity to users of the services. Now, what the literature says is that this translation from passive to active equity is not automatic. It depends a lot on the discretion of bureaucrats. So if the bureaucrats have a lot of discretion, this representativeness will translate in a more equitable service. If there are rigid rules and they have no discretion or very low discretion, we will not have an automatic improvement of the equity of services to different races or ethnicities or gender or poor people, and so on. So this is a summary of the very large literature on this topic. Another important stream is the one on red tape or administrative burden. The literature says that red tape damages equity. So some citizens have more difficulties in managing red tape than others, and those citizens are vulnerable citizens. So how can administrative simplification improve equity? Through formal policy design, through attention to policy implementation, taking into account social factors and also third parties. For instance, if a procedure is totally digital, and then the physical shops are closed or are very few, of course, this will create a problem for those parts of the population that have a digital divide, that cannot access the technology. So keeping this in mind when designing the digital government, keeping this in mind when we implement it, or also introducing third parties to help, to intermediate, can help to reduce the administrative burden for vulnerable people. Another stream of literature is the one on reforms, and particularly on new public management. We know that the new public management is a liberal theory of public management reform. There are empirical studies, and not only theoretical studies, empirical studies that show that some new public management levers will worsen or have worsened equity. For instance, studies of World Bank programs in some countries, or also of reforms in English local government. There are a lot of empirical studies. In particular, public-private partnerships, privatization, corporatization, and also fragmentation of local government are all reform lines that will make equity worse. So we focus on two reforms, vertical decentralization and privatization. On vertical decentralization, there are historical studies on equity. Now, vertical decentralization may improve equity. Why? Because local governments are more knowledgeable about the particularities, the specificities of their local populations and the local territories, so they can better satisfy equity needs. This is what the literature says. Regarding privatization, the relationship with equity is surely negative. It is negative because when privatization occurs, the private provider will look at citizens as customers and will base the furniture of services on the ability to pay. There are examples of cream skimming. This means that services, when there is a higher return on investment, will be increased. And services, when there is a low return on investment, or even there is no profit, will be eliminated. This means that the target of population will not be served in privatized services. So equity is worsened. Okay. And this, what you find between brackets are taken from the study. So privatization will create an even landscape. So services for some citizens will become better with privatization, of higher quality, even of lower cost, but for others will become worse. And also there will be an effort to keep costs down by doing very little to serve vulnerable citizens. This is very true in education or in healthcare, especially where privatization is followed by, and here we go, performance management indicators. Performance management systems come from the new public management reforms and have developed around efficiency and effectiveness. sometimes there are social equity indicators, but are not at the heart of performance management systems. This is due to two reasons. The first reason is because all the performance management literature comes from the private sector. And in the private sector, the attention is to efficiency and quality and not to equity. And also because these reforms, performance management reforms, have been introduced together with competition. And when you use performance management based on efficiency and effectiveness and make organizations compete with each other, the risks for social equity are very big. Think about the United States or also other, unfortunately, also European countries where the funding from the central government to the hospitals, to the schools, to the regions, to the local government is based on efficiency and effectiveness. All this competition based on these indicators will mean that those citizens that cost a lot and do not allow the organizations to reach the higher efficiency and effectiveness levels are left behind. In the United States, we have the charter schools. Charter schools have to receive the funds from the federal government and from the state government, and to receive these funds, they have to have children that complete the school with certain grades. So they make the selection at the beginning, at the entry, and they do not allow certain students to access the school because it will be difficult for these students to reach this high grade. And this means the failure of the public service philosophy. Public service should be for the most vulnerable parts of the society, not for the most prepared and well-off people. So, but what does the literature say? Also that it is not sufficient that we just introduce social equity indicators inside performance management systems. We also need powerful stakeholders and protective institutions. So we need the data, but then we also need somebody to take the advocacy role using this data. It's not sufficient to just have the data on equity. Finally, there is the co-production and participation literature. This is a stream of literature that is very close to my heart. But there is, somebody talks about dark co-production. There are concerns that citizens that are able to contribute to co-production will receive better quality services. And citizens that are vulnerable and don't have the time, don't have the money, don't have the competencies to be part of the co-production will see their services worsen in terms of quantity and quality. However, there is also some literature that says that we should look at equity not at the entry point, if all people are co-producing, but at the end result. Because it doesn't mean that if we have an equal participation, we will also have an equal services, co-produced services. Anyway, in the moment that we design co-production, we should pay particular attention to citizen selection at that moment. We should not have, we should not design co-production leaving selection to the citizen, so self-selection. But we should try to lift constraints for disadvantaged people. For instance, in one of my early studies on co-production, I studied co-production of malaria treatment in Tigray in Ethiopia. And it was a very successful project, a project that reduced mortality from malaria of 40%, just because it was based on co-production. So it was an experiment of the World Health Organization. So there were two regions with the same characteristics. In one, there were only the hospitals delivering the malaria treatment, and in the other, there were the head of tribes that received some training, and they were providing the pills to treat malaria, and they were supervising their tribes and communicating to the hospital. And this not the treatment, the clinical treatment was the same, but just leaning on co-production reduced mortality of 40%. But there was a problem. All the head of tribes were men. This meant that when they looked at the citizens that received the treatment, a good part of the citizens were men. Women, and also children, because children were taken care by the women, had a lower access to the service. So one of the recommendations of the study was to try to involve also women, although sometimes they did not have the skills to co-produce, so sometimes they couldn't read or write, but to involve them, because this way equity would improve as well. So the design moment of co-production is important also to take care of equity concerns. So summing up, what comes from the literature review is that there are different aspects of public services that have an impact on equity. So the first important conclusion is that as public management scholars, we have to study equity, because the way public services are managed and are delivered has an impact on equity. This is the first important conclusion. The second one is that the impact is mixed. So there are some aspects and some reforms that have a positive effect and others that have negative effects. But these studies are very fragmented, which in reality is not the case. So in reality, we will have the personnel that is representative or not, we will have the privatization, we will have a performance management system, and all this coexist. So we have to look at how these things combine with each other. For example, all the role of bureaucratic discretion is very important in terms of equity. So all the studies on street level bureaucracy that are growing should also link with the equity studies. So what is needed? Conceptual clarity. So it is important when doing research on equity to clarify if we are talking about equity or equality, if we are talking about equity as part of effectiveness or as something distinctive. Second, focus on public service delivery, not only on human resources management or participation in voting or other things. And third, to make an effort to define indicators, operational indicators, because public managers do not only need, let's say, definitions, but they need also indications on how they can measure equity. In some fields, there are indicators, there are a lot of indicators. For example, in education or in health, we have a lot of indicators, but these indicators are outcome, long-term indicators, like quality of life or anyway, outcome indicators that take a lot of years to manifest. What a public manager needs is operational indicators in terms of inputs, processes, immediate output. So this is an important field of research where we can give our contribution. Sorry, guys. Okay, so this is what we can do in future research. And with this slide, I complete my presentation. And I will be happy to discuss with you the different points that are raised during this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Professor Denita. It was an excellent presentation, very good ideas. Let me pass to the Professor Claudia to some comments, and Professor Alqueta. And after Claudia and Alqueta, we can open to the audience to some questions and comments. But thanks a lot. A very good presentation. Claudia,
Thank
por
you.
favor.
Yes, yes. Hello, Denita. Congratulations your presentation. The theoretical framework you present and the reflections in your carry out on the subject are very interesting. I have two observations, and I would like to share and hear your opinion, okay? Sorry. The first one is about the figure in the shape of circle that you present, okay? I keep thinking about the institutionalization of the democratic regime, and could it not be a variable to include? Political policy theory, for example, places this variable and the determinant for the type of social welfare public policy over the past century is one of that. And the second point involves the issue of a public-private partnership, PPP. Personally, I share the same statement in your presentation. But in Brazil, we have a very peculiar case involving public partnership, called Piauí Conectado. The Piauí Conectado is being used by the government of state of Piauí to overcome the difficulties of Brazilian legislation in contract digital inclusion services, especially given the problems caused by the pandemic in the provision of basic education. It's a very susceptible case in promotion equity. In this sense, how do you think these tools propagate in the new public management? You understand? So anyway,
yes,
thank you.
Claudia, can I ask you just to repeat the first comment? I'm not
The
sure
first, okay.
The first one, yes, thank you.
Yeah, the first one, I think about the institutionalization of a democratic regime. It's very different from in one country from the other country. It's very different. And it's very determined for the type of social welfare public policy, for example. And the framework in public policy, talking about this kind of legacy is important to define how can do the equality in each countries. So I think in your figure to put in or talking about, I want to hear you, okay? And the second, okay, and the second is okay?
No, the second is very clear. Yeah. No, not even the first. No, I understood it.
Well, anyway, thank you for the presentation. My questions are small curiosity to open the discussion with our dear Brazilian researchers. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Theo and Claudia. This is the first time I'm presenting this research on equity. So after 2 years of working, not alone because we were in two, but almost alone, I'm happy to discuss what we have written with a wide community. Thank you very much for your 2 points, very important points. The first one, I think it has to do with countries' traditions, with the different country cultures, how equity is conceptualized. But there is one thing that is in common with many countries. One thing that we have to say is that the new public management, which almost all public management scholars do not like, or do not like anymore, but the new public management has interested all countries in the world.
Yeah.
From Italy to Brazil to the United States, United Kingdom, where it started, to Afghanistan, to India. So all countries in the world have adopted the new public management. In countries like Italy, which was almost a communist country, because almost 70% of the GDP was public. So a lot of sectors were public property. The new public management meant a big privatization. And this is because what the previous model of totally public property and public provision was considered the best model to provide equity, but not efficient. At the end, it did not provide equity also.
Yeah.
So in Italy, the healthcare system was centralized before 1993. It was centralized. So the ministry, the central ministry, will decide the money to be allocated, the type of service to be provided, also the organizational structure of each hospital, of each healthcare agency. This equity in the input did not provide any equity in the output and in the outcome. All the central southern Italy suffered a lot of low quality services, low quantity services in healthcare. So with the public management reform and the competition, public-public and public-private competition, it was said that all the new public management will provide not only efficiency, but also a big equity, because every citizen will be able to choose the hospital across the country, even across the European Union now. And this will mean higher equity, because even if I'm a poor citizen, I can go in the best hospital and I will not pay more, because it's the state that will pay the hospital. So this will, the competition, the invisible hand of competition will automatically improve also equity. This was the philosophy. Now, since 1993, today we are in 2021 and equity has not improved, and even efficiency has not improved with new public management and competition. So it comes out that the public model did not function, but even the market model did not function. So there is now an orientation to integrate and to collaborate. So greater collaboration, all the public governance theory. So regardless of the country tradition, there is this conviction now that the liberalism and the market does not work very well for equity in critical public sectors. And this is something that has even been accepted from the UK and other countries, not only from countries that traditionally are not liberal countries. So this is the first thing that that comes in mind. So the discourse on equity is more complex than what was in the mind of the politicians that approved the reform. It's more complex. It's not market, public, or networks. It's something to be decided specifically based on the context, based on the service, based on the characteristics of the population. Regarding your second observation on public-private partnerships, yes, it's true that there is a big problem of risk allocation. When a public subject and the private subject enter in a partnership, they share the risk. But how are these risks shared? Usually, it's that the private partner will take all the let's say easy rewards, and all the unexpected things will come on the public side, which is okay, because we cannot expect a private firm to take care of complex issues of public concerns. But this should be stated very clearly, should be part of the negotiation. And sometimes this is not so, because I think, I'm not a public-private partnership expert, but I think, first of all, because public managers need the skills to negotiate, and these skills are different from the skills to deliver the service. So they used to deliver the service, they know very well the service, But when you enter a public-private partnership, or when you outsource part of the service, or when you privatize the service or part of the service, you are doing a different job than providing the service. You should negotiate the cost and the results, and should be a very good negotiator in also highlighting what the risks will be and which risks will be carried out by the private partner and which risks by the public partner. And these skills are not well developed, And of course, the unexpected events are not in terms of small costs. These are predictable, but are in terms of equity, in terms of outcomes, which take a lot of time to materialize.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered.
No, it's very good. But I open to the discussions with our colleagues. Okay, you have some questions. Thank you very much, and nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Claudia.
One more time, thanks, Denita, thanks, Claudia. Alqueta, you'd like to put some questions, some comments? We have here by chat, Denita, a question by Mayara that we will open the microphone to put the question. I have a question too, but before I think Professor Alqueta would like to do some comments too, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Denisa. Thank you, Theo. It's a very necessary question and a theme that you debated, and I think it talks a lot to our main theme for our this year event. So thank you very much again. I think I have two questions, call for reflection. So the first one will be, how do populist governments challenge the theme of equity in public service? I don't know if you have reflected on this topic, but since the danger is very imminent, not just in Brazil, but also in Italy and other many European countries. And we know that one characteristic of populist government is the type of the divisive policies they introduced within the population and within the government. I think would be nice to hear from you what would be the challenges of the populism for the theme, for the topic of equity in public service. And my second question is more related to your last thoughts about the managerial challenges. I was wondering how in countries like Brazil and Italy, which are shaped by a form of legalistic Napoleonic form of government, where everything is written in laws and the managers do not have much discretion to negotiate the type of partnerships that you are suggesting, etc. So how can we advance in this direction? Because I agree with you, you advocate a tailor-made approach. So there is not the best model for all type of public service delivery. So we need to have a tailor-made approach, a contextual approach. Sometimes direct service delivery works better, but sometimes collaboration or partnerships or even competition with the market or nonprofit would be the best option. But how to introduce this tailor-made approach within this rigid legalistic environment that I kind of know that both countries share? Those are my questions. I'm sure others will follow up with others. Thanks a lot, Denita.
Thank you very much, Katie. Both questions are really very inspiring to look further. I haven't thought about the populist, haven't thought a lot about the populist risk. Of course, there are. What we know is that the polarization of politics, we now have politics which are more extreme and polarized than 30 or 40 years ago. It's a consequence also of the rising inequities in society. So it's like a vicious circle. As equity worsens, political parties find a very fertile ground to grow extreme ideas. So it's I don't have solutions, but I agree that the two topics are very connected. And just yesterday, I had a student in Italy that asked to do a thesis on how populism and management of COVID in Brazil have worked together. So I accepted to be her supervisor, although I will ask some of you for help in in finding materials on how these two things work together. So surely populism is a risk for equity. And we are seeing this in Brazil, but also in the United Kingdom with the Brexit consequences. It's very clear that these consequences are very bad, especially for vulnerable people. Regarding the administrative law countries, yes, from the literature, it is very clear that the bureaucratic discretion is important to make things work in favor of equity. And we don't have well, we have bureaucratic discretion in administrative law countries, but not so much. And especially we have a low propensity, a low attitude to risks from bureaucrats. So bureaucrats may have some discretion, but they don't want to use this discretion to take risks because the culture is against risk in these countries. There's a recent news from 2 days ago in Italy of a mayor in southern Italy, in Sicily, a mayor that has been studied not only in Italy, but also abroad as an example of social innovation in integrating refugees that arrive in Sicily, in integrating these refugees from Libya and Syria and other countries into the society through an innovative model by providing them with jobs, with houses, and without spending a lot of public money through fundraising and everything. Now, this mayor 2 days ago has been, from a judge, has been given 13 years of prison just for escaping the rules. He has something like 20 euros in his bank account. So he did not get rich with the money. He used the European Union money and private fundraising money to make refugees integrated in the society. And his name is Mimo Lucano. There have been also movies about this mayor who has used social innovation, creativity to help the most vulnerable people that arrive in Italy from weeks and weeks in Libya. And he has been just found guilty of not applying at 100% the procedures. So it's very difficult in countries like our countries to do this. The United States are doing something very interesting. President Biden has asked all United States agencies to undertake equity reviews. So they should review all the activities and all the services they provide, not in terms of cost and quality and effectiveness, but specifically, explicitly in terms of equity. And they are asked to change what impacts negatively on equity. So something which is very Napoleonic, but is being carried out by Biden in the United States, maybe we should also consider a legal requirement that this one to be applied to single agencies. So a transportation organization, a hospital, a school, a local government, and so on. Yes.
Thank you, Denita.
Thanks a lot. Let's do a round of 3 questions now. Mayara wants to put her questions, and I would like to put one question too, and another colleague after me, please put some questions too. Mayara, please introduce yourself and put your question to Professor Denita, please.
Hi, Professor Tel. Thank you, Professor Denita, for your presentation. I'm sorry I cannot turn on my camera because, well, I'm not at home right now, but I was paying attention to your presentation. I am very glad that I was very glad when I knew that you were going to make this presentation, because I have the chance to read your paper on equity, and at that time by Twitter, because I knew you from your Twitter post. So it was very nice to see that you were presenting your literature review. But I would like to make a question about the effect on equity, on administrative burdens, and because, well, you mentioned that digital government and how digital government related to citizens and to this perception about the burdens when dealing with government. So I wanted to know, what do you anticipate regarding the effects of digital government on equity and on administrative burdens too? Thank you for the opportunity, Professor Theo and Professor Denita.
Okay, thanks a lot, Denita. Wait a minute. Let's put the 3 questions from different people, and you answer all the questions. Okay? Could it be in this way? Three questions and comments from the audience. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Another colleague would put some comments or make some questions. Another colleague here in the audience. You have a question here by chats. Please make your question.
I was just listening. Thank you, Denita. Pleased to meet you. And I was wondering while listening to you that sometimes we have reactions. For example, you mentioned polarization. When we are able to promote equity, when we are successful in promoting equity, putting this subject in the agenda, because those who have their power or benefits reduced or shared, or they perceive this way, so they tend to react to try to fight for keeping their privilege. And how do we deal with that? How we communicate about the necessity and the possible social benefits of promoting equity to counterbalance this tendency to promote the divide from those who feel they are losing power.
Thanks a lot, Paula. I put 2 questions. The first questions, Denita, Professor Denita, is about the spatial dimension of equity. Here in Brazil, you give different names to the spatial issues. Sometimes some people use the word territory, that in Portuguese has a specific meaning, território in Portuguese. Some people talk about regional analysis of public policy, for example, or the spatial dimension of on the public policy about equity is important, because you have a very large country with different public equipments and infrastructure established historically in different places. In your next future research, a spatial dimension is an important dimension or not? It's not relevant. And the second one, questions, I would like to put 2 questions. Is based on your colleague from Italy, the sociologist and political science, Donatella Della Porta, that talk about progressive social movements and regressive conservative social movements. The character, the kind of social movements make some connections with the state, with the government, with the public policy, has some impact on the equity. If you can came from the progress and cosmopolitan social movement, or a conservative social movement that try to maintain some rights lost during decades of neoliberal approach on the state. Okay, I'm clear in my questions, Professor Denita. Yeah.
Yes, the connection. The
Yeah.
connection in the first question did not work very well. If you can
Yeah.
repeat it.
Yeah, I'd like that you discuss about the spatial analysis of public policy. Is an important issue to discuss equity by public policy, the spatial, the provision of inside a country, a territory, a municipality, because sometimes you have in Brazilian cities, big cities, a core place of the city, and as you call in Portuguese, periferia, with the favelas, with some slums around a core place. So the spatial analysis of public policy is important to bring, to theorize about equity on the public policy. Yeah. I'm clear now?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So I'll go with the first one on the administrative burdens and the digital divide. So what will be, Mayar was saying, what will be the impact of the digital government on equity? I think we cannot say this in advance. Sometimes, well, also during the pandemic, the digital government helped us a lot to continue to not to interrupt a lot of public services. But we have a big digital divide in some countries and in for some parts of the society. Sometimes this is economic, so there are poor people that don't have access to technologies. In other cases, it has to do with age. In societies like Italy, there are a lot of people that are very old, so they cannot be acquainted with the latest, the most recent technology. Now, this should be kept in mind when a public service is being designed. When I design a public service, the first thing that I should know is who will benefit from this public service. And I should design it accordingly. For instance, the social security institution in Italy that provides information on pensions has a lot of demands on the phone rather than on the internet. It's very easy to enter the website with a password and you have all the contributions, information on the pensions, information on all the financial support you can have. But this is very difficult for a good part of the users. So they have a lot of employees working on the telephone rather than on the internet or in presence. So the important thing is that technology is adapted to the users and not vice versa. It's not the users that should be adapted to technology, because this may mean that some categories of users will be excluded and we will have a worsening of equity. And the same goes with administrative burden. Sometimes these issues are solved not by the public sector, but by third sector or social enterprises. For instance, in Italy, 2 teenagers raised an initiative, a project in which they asked people, they were very skilled in adjusting computers. So they asked people to give their computers, if they were not working very good but were in good shape, they will adjust the computer and will give this to children that did not have a computer to continue the lectures, the lessons in their homes during the pandemic. So they started this as a game, but then this became a big social enterprise thanks to a great success. A lot of people were willing to give money and computers. And this is something that the schools should do. So a teacher should know which of the children have a computer in their house, or sometimes when we talk about 3, 4, 5 children, this means that the house should have 4 computers, not 1. So it's the local level that should recognize equity issues and address them, but sometimes the non-profit sector is more flexible to address these issues. especially when you don't have a lot of time to address a crisis or an issue. And then the question by Paula on the social benefits of promoting equity. I think this is a big problem, Paula, because there are a lot of people that lose power and money when there are efforts and policies to improve equity. And so I agree with you that the social benefits should be highlighted. For instance, we have the phenomenon of the big philanthropy of Amazon, of Google, of these big firms that give a lot of money for social aims. And the public opinion should be sensibilized to say that you have to pay taxes in the countries when you work, not be a big philanthropist. You have to pay taxes to the state and to the public sectors. And it's the state and the public sector that should decide where the taxes and the money should go, rather than doing direct philanthropy initiatives, which are very good, have a lot of benefits, but are not the right thing to do. So the public opinion in part is already sensibilized on this. Yes, and well, Theo, regarding your two comments, the first thing to say is that political scientists have done a lot on equity. So we know a lot on the social movement or public policies, but we don't know a lot on the public services. So my expertise and my focus is especially on public services, which have not been sufficiently explored. Regarding social movements, yes, social movements come from equity problems. So equity problems raise new social movements. I think it's not automatic that the social movement will improve equity. So sometimes there are declarations, but these declarations will not have a real impact in reality. Yesterday and today, there were elections in Rome for the local government of Rome, and Rome comes from 5 years of a mayor from the social movement of 5 stars, the famous social movement that was born in Italy as a protest of the existing politics. But this social movement did not reach did not maintain the promises, did not reach a very good, did not raise the quality of the service. So the social movement, especially I'm talking about Rome, also replying to your first question, that we have the national, the global, but we have also the local level. So regarding Rome, the previous elections were after a big corruption, a big scandal, when the previous party was, they used it was called Mafia Capitale, because Capitale is the capital city of Italy, and Mafia Capitale because all the green maintenance, all the social services, immigration services, so all were corrupt. And in all these services, the private providers that were paid with public money were using this money not for providing the services, but for their own benefits. So the social movement was a protest to the existing situation, but at the end of the 5 years, what happened? There was a stop in spending. So from the fear of corruption, they did not spend anything in transportation, in maintenance of green areas, in schools, so the situation, the quality of the services worsened a lot, although there were no big corruption scandals, only small ones, but the quality is really, really worse compared to 5 years ago. So the social movement that had the word honesty as a slogan pursued honesty, but worsened a lot equity, because when I don't have green areas, I don't have nice schools, I don't have transportation, the rich people will anyway find these services in the private sector, but the most vulnerable people will suffer more. So social movements, it's not automatic. From my experience, it's not automatic that they improve equity, although they may have this amount of promises.
Thanks a lot, Professor Denita. There is some comments here in the chat. I don't know if you saw these comments, or Paula, if you like to put one more question. Claudia talk about the whole of the university connecting our research and the community's needs. And I'd like to do one more question, but let's wait for the audience to more colleagues. Someone would like to put more questions, please? Paula, put a second question, please. No, you don't?
So Paula has a question, but needs to turn on the audio, Paula.
Yeah,
no,
the microphone.
I was saying
Yeah.
that I will think about it because I was thinking about the last question and your answer. Thank you, Denita.
Thank you, Paula. And I read your comment on the collaboration between university and municipalities.
Oh yes, I will be at the same panel with Claudia in the next round. We'll discuss this kind of partnerships between universities and public government and municipalities, and this is a way to learn about how to promote equity in public services, and also to learn how to do it in our universities. So this is the topic of the conference, and I appreciate the efforts Alketa and other colleagues are doing on that in our field. It's very important to think how we engage and do this in our own activities, to think about it and to include this as part of our daily work, and also to learn with the municipalities who are being able to do that, to improve the quality of public services, including some criteria of equity. So we'll discuss this in the next panel, right, Claudia?
Yeah.
I'm sorry I won't be able to continue to attend because it's late at night here and I have to put the two kids at bed, but I would love to read this research, Paula, if you can send it to me.
And Denita, let me put one more question to you. Take one more question, please. We as academics, you must change our way of to do the research, to give classes and connect with the practitioners of the public management when we have a concern about equity. How to change this? What is necessary to change in our behavior as academics? Please.
Thank you, Theo. I think it's a very important thing to do, and it's a bit part of the ethics of civil servants. Only that all these years of reforms have promoted this view in which efficiency and effectiveness are the top values of public servants, but also of ours as academicians. And equity is just something, an ethical behavior, but it's not at the heart of what we do. And I think this is okay for a private employee, but not for a public one. I think equity is as important as efficiency, is as important as quality. We have all these rankings of universities, for example, and we know that in these rankings, we don't have even one indicator on equity. Nobody says how many vulnerable people or people that have, I don't know, learning disabilities, or people that would not have attended university till the end if it wasn't for your extra effort. Have you carried on. We don't have any indicator like that, and we have to put them. Maybe also to create new rankings on equity, not only on efficiency or quality or internationalization or whatever. I think this is important also.
Thanks a lot. Very good discussion and presentation. We will have some time more in our meeting here. Some colleagues and some more people, everyone, would you like to put more questions or discuss or comments? No? So, thanks a lot, Professor Denita. Nice to meet you. I hope you could do some connections to future research together. Here you have researchers from the public administration from different parts of Brazil, places. Nice to meet you, know your research, and thanks a lot. Oketa, please make some final comments and regards.
Thank you. No, I would like to thank you, Denita. Thank you a lot for your time, for making, for being here with us today. And I hope to have you in our next meetings in the future. Thanks a lot and good luck with your research. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alketa. Thank you, Theo. Thank you, Claudia, and all of you for the attention and for the comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, all the people.
Bye, everyone. And hope to see you in presence next time. Thank you.
Denita, I am looking for you in my research with Mark Meneguzzo. Okay?
I will send you your greetings.
Okay. Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Obrigado a todo mundo. Até a próxima, pessoal. Valeu demais. Muito obrigado, Cláudia. Obrigado, Alqueta, todo mundo. Estou achando que esse Lustosa aqui é o Frederico Lustosa. Ficou silencioso, né? Com a câmera fechada, mas eu acho que é, né, Fred?
Sou eu mesmo. Sou eu mesmo, amigo.
Um abraço com saudade, viu? Some não.
Saudade de vocês também, todos. Bom demais vê-los aí.
Não, pensar que a gente já está todo mundo junto, né, Fred?
Deus quiser.
Tá chegando perto, vamos lá.
Ah, verdade.
Beijo.
Obrigada.
Beijo, gente. Até a próxima. Tchau, tchau. Até mais.